Well, hey, friends, welcome again to Q on Q. We are glad you are with us this week. Wow, what a few weeks it has been. There's been a few weeks since our last episode. It's been busy for us. We've been to some marching band festivals, got to see our son perform a lot, which has been great. My wife and I went out of town for a few days. Got to see Point of Grace, if you've ever seen them before, one of her all time favorite musical groups. Had some beautiful weather around our parts. It was 82 degrees yesterday, and then had some storms come through that kind of cooled things off. It's been interesting in the school world too. Lots of schools in our area had security scares in the last couple weeks, and just been very eventful. And all that's gone on these last few weeks really has kept the topic of this episode on the forefront of my mind. So let's get to it. This week, we continue our Going to the Movies series with probably the least recognizable of the titles we'll be covering. It's a 2009 George Clooney movie entitled Up in the Air. In case you've never seen the movie, let me give you a quick summary, and maybe I won't spoil the ending for you this week like I have been doing. The story is centered on a traveling corporate downsizer named Ryan Bingham, played by George Clooney. His job is to travel the world working in employment termination assistance. In other words, he helps companies lay people off. His life philosophy is one about disconnecting and detaching, as his whole job is literally to tell people that they're being cut off. Ryan also gives motivational speeches using the analogy, "What's in your backpack?" trying to push the lifestyle of living free of possessions and relationships. When his company floats the idea of moving his job virtual and doing the layoffs through video conferencing, Ryan raises concerns that the new system is impersonal and says the bosses don't understand how the firing process leads to emotionally vulnerable people. As he continues through his work, Ryan begins questioning his lifestyle and philosophies and starts to doubt what he lectures others about. He finds out a girl he was having a relationship with was married. He also finds out one of the employees fired virtually takes their own life. The remote layoff program is stopped and Ryan is sent back on the road. He accumulates 10 million frequent flyer miles, and when thinking about his travels and his lifestyle, realizes that even though he has a city he works out of, he's so transient with his work and his life, he really has no home and no connections to one place or to people in general. The film examines the philosophy. What if you decided to live hub to hub, city to city, with nothing and nobody? So, despite his occupation and helping companies essentially fire people, Ryan's job really centers around helping people disconnect. It takes them from relationships, from employment, and from environments they've known and severs that connection, essentially leaving them forced to find something new. He lives a life of fewer things, fewer connections. If you haven't figured it out yet, this week's episode is going to be about relationships. Now, I'm not going to go off on a spiel about being connected to too much stuff and not craving possessions of the world or anything like that. I want to focus on people. Ryan lived his life with no connections, and when he had the chance to make those, they seemed to exist on a surface level or even a fictitious storyline without a firm foundation. So today I want to talk to you about the very thing Ryan didn't seem to have many of or be very good at: relationships. I think too often, each of us tries to live some aspect of the life Ryan lived. We shelter ourselves and avoid connecting with people. We try to live out relationships but value them on the surface only. We feel we can do it on our own or preach to others about how they know best. Each of us has a variety of relationships with other people in our lives. There are casual acquaintances, people we know a little bit about, but not too much. The social media era seems to have exploded our number of casual acquaintances. Oftentimes, you get connected, or so you think, with people you've never met, but who know someone you know. Then we have friends, people we consider ourselves to be close to and we regularly communicate with. We might have friends at work, in our neighborhoods, at our schools, from communities of our past, or in church. We have less friends than casual acquaintances. Then we have our close friends. These are the people that we share with on a deeper level what's going on in our lives. Most people don't have a lot of close friends, but our close friends are important to us, and some are closer than others. As I mentioned a moment ago, social media has become a commonplace substitute for growing real relationships. Now, there's a lot of good things about Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and the like, but the number of Facebook friends you have, or the number of posts you make, really doesn't tell whether you have great relationships. A recent study of college students showed that the average amount of time spent on social media by the students interviewed was 20 hours per week. That's almost 3 hours a day. And over half admitted their time online caused them to neglect in person relationships and other important responsibilities. We can't forget we were designed by God for relationships. Clear back in the beginning of the scriptures, it says, when God created man, he said it is not good that man should live alone. But relationships can be complicated at times. All of the relationships we hold have varying levels of connection, and they can all bring us great joy or deep distress. We all know people who can be pretty difficult to interact with sometimes. I have a feeling that if your life has been anything like mine, at some point or another, you've probably been forced to interact with somebody who may have been hurtful or dishonest with you. Maybe you've been attacked or betrayed. This often causes people to want to interact more with their pets or with their Alexa than with real people. Seems like it's hard to blame them, but the truth is, we can navigate the complexities of relationships. I want to share with you today a few different things we can do to have healthy relationships. We're called to do it. So, what do we have to do? Or what can we be proactive about to have those types of connections? How can we build, invest in, and keep healthy relationships? Well, the first thing is this: to have a healthy relationship, you need to demonstrate how much you value the other party. This is one I think we take for granted, or maybe it's that we take the relationship or the person for granted. People who demonstrate the value others have to them are able to maintain healthy relationships. It's because they go out of their way to make it known. And I'm not talking about bragging, I'm just meaning they make it obvious that somebody else is important to them. Sometimes it's by using words, sometimes it's through actions, sometimes it's with gifts, though let me say your relationship shouldn't be healthy because it's bought. One way or another, value and importance gets communicated. I think communication is the key in this regard. We need to be somebody who makes a point to demonstrate that we're listening when talking to others and that we're genuinely seeking to understand them. We need to be someone who is careful about the words that come out of our mouths. This involves thinking before we speak. Do you know how powerful words are in a relationship, both positive and negative? Negative words separate and divide, while positive words create bonds and growth. I find myself struggling with this one sometimes because I am so focused on myself. And it's a little different than having a big ego or a lot of self worth. It's just that if I'm having a conversation with somebody and it's evident that they just don't understand something or their rationale doesn't make sense, or if my mind is somewhere else, I stop listening and I stop talking, or it turns into a yeah type of response, not really a conversation. When we take time to be present in the moment, to offer conversation, not just a listening ear, but also offering good counsel, those moments tend to matter. Those moments give value to another party, and in turn, give value to a relationship. Secondly, to foster a healthy relationship, you have to be willing to have a servant's heart. Now, hear me out here. I'm not talking about giving, 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 and the other party taking, taking, taking. That is not a healthy relationship. But here's what I mean. During Jesus' earthly ministry, he made a point to sacrificially serve others and in turn made connections with those people. And I think healthy relationships happen when people are likewise inspired to serve one another just like he did. Now, you can't make the other person live a life of service, but you've probably heard the saying that a healthy relationship takes two to make it work. While you can't control how others feel or what they do, you can exhibit a spirit of serving others. That's the least we can do. We should never make the mistake of just waiting around for somebody else to serve us. I think there's some things we can think about that will help us keep that servant mentality. We should never miss an opportunity to be an encouragement or say a compliment. In turn, we should refuse to talk negatively about others and tune out when others do. We also need to keep our promises when we make them, unless something arises after we make them that makes it impossible to do so. If we make promises more sparingly or in a more deliberate manner, we can keep them more faithfully. And third, in order for a relationship to be healthy, we must be willing to invest in others as much as we invest in ourselves. Investing in relationships and keeping them long term is probably one of the most difficult things we face in life. You might be sitting there saying, nah, it's easy to keep a friendship, or we'll be together forever. Well, there are many things that can complicate that statement. There will be moments, many moments, when we might feel like we don't have the emotional energy to just keep giving, or in some cases, keep forgiving. But just the sacrificial example exhibited so much in the scriptures, we must be willing to give and give what is required of us in a relationship. It might sound easy, but it does take work. Things like taking time to talk to each other. Boy, if I had a nickel for every time I should have talked to somebody, but something else got in the way. Good communication is key to any relationship. How many times do we find ourselves too busy or saying, I'll call them tomorrow? And our schedules and other things in life have really become a priority. And to be honest, we don't always see it the same when others act that way. What if the other party says that to us? Or what if they don't call us? What about honesty and trustworthiness? Trust is like a glue that holds relationships together. Do we give the amount of trust necessary in a relationship? We often expect other parties to trust us, but are we giving enough to them to trust us? What about forgiveness? We all make mistakes, and forgiving each other is crucial for meaningful relationships. Forgiveness isn't easy sometimes. Sometimes we dwell on negative feelings, focus on hurtful events, develop grudges. Sometimes we're afraid if we continue in a relationship, we'll be hurt again or we'll lose our identity. Forgiveness can take time, effort, and sometimes support from others, but conflict in relationships can only be resolved when we're willing to give forgiveness. And while these things can seem trivial or obvious, you might be sitting there saying, yeah, I know, heard this all before. These things are often difficult to put into practice. Why so often are we driven towards ourselves? Why does selfishness become what our relationship is built on? Why are we so afraid to be intentional with putting things into practice to keep our relationships thriving? By talking openly, being trustworthy, and forgiving each other when necessary, we can keep our relationships strong and lasting. I'm sure most of you have ridden in an elevator at some point in your lives or another. Sometimes they can be unusual and awkward places, especially if they're crowded. Think of the last time you were in an elevator. Do you notice nobody talks? Especially if it's full of strangers. You feel awkward looking at people. You look anywhere except up, or maybe just as the numbers change on the screen. Have you ever seen people walk into an elevator talking, but as soon as they enter, they stop? I remember this one time we were going to a musical, I think it was, or a symphony concert or something, and we were pretty packed in an elevator, and as we're headed down to the bottom floor, the elevator stopped. I think it was on the second floor. And an older couple had that, we're going to make room for ourselves to fit in this elevator, and they came in. But there wasn't enough time or room for them to turn around before the door closed. The door closed, the gentleman made some comment. I don't remember what it was, but I just remember that everybody in the elevator broke out in laughter. And after that, people started talking to each other, even though it was a very short ride. In many respects, that elevator is like a snapshot of our world today. We seem to prefer isolation, especially if it's with people we don't know. We just want to avoid it completely. We can be in a group and feel like we aren't a part of that group. We can be part of what we consider to be a community or small group and feel like we don't belong. We can be with others but feel like we have no significant relationships. It's what I think makes the music community so special. I've been involved in music for most of my life, and as a full time teacher in the field for 27 years, I see how the music room, the band room, the choir room becomes a home for so many kids, and how these groups become literally like a family. A day doesn't go by that I don't see a student taking it on their own initiative to show a younger kid a fingering for an instrument, to help carry a bag, to offer extra lessons, or just give them advice or talk about life. Okay, so where am I going with this? The elevator, the music room? Well, here's where I'm going. This need for others is God given and deeply rooted in who we are. Even Maslow reinforced God's original design in his hierarchy of needs. He believed that each of us has various levels of need, and part of the way we get our needs met is to be part of a group and experience caring relationships. We need other people. We can't take relationships lightly. Relationships that survive and that provide us what we need literally give us our basic human needs. Without those relationships, some of our basic human needs don't feel like they're being met. They require effort. We have to do more than just reach out to others or coexist with others. We have to literally share our lives with them. And I'm not talking about spreading everybody's gossip, but it's not enough to admit we need each other or say, no, I'll just have one or two friends and live my life by myself. We have to commit to getting beneath the surface talk and become interested and accountable to each other. The fact is that authenticity occurs when the masks come off, when the conversations get deep, and when people get vulnerable. And in those relationships, accountability comes in and life is shared. When we make room for others in our lives, when we give priority to the relationships we have, the walls come down. When we make room for others, we discover the best of others and discover the best in ourselves. Some of you might recognize the name Bear Bryant. The Alabama football coach led his program to 6 national championships, and he had over 300 wins as a head coach. Well, one season, his team had a Fellowship of Christian Athletes chapter, and Bryant was concerned about his team going, quote, soft because of the care they showed each other through FCA. Well, it turned out to be one of his best seasons, and he credited the FCA chapter for bringing such a oneness and closeness to the team. That's a nice story. But what happened for that football team, what happened in that elevator, happens literally every day in groups all over the world. People need each other. We need each other. It's time for us to take off the masks and allow ourselves to be real with others. When we admit our need for each other, when we're real with each other, when we're excited about doing life together, healthy and thriving relationships happen. If you're struggling in a relationship or struggling finding a relationship, I pray you look for authenticity. I pray you're willing to be vulnerable. I encourage you to look for what you give and how you can serve, what keeps your relationship together or what's keeping it from functioning. And admittedly, not every relationship is going to last or is meant to last. But for the ones you have, the ones that mean something to you, the ones that God put in your path, what can you do to be a meaningful, belonging part of that connection? Friends, be real. Be vulnerable, be giving, and be open. May we never settle for connections that are just ordinary, but long for relationships that are extraordinary. Next time, we'll be wrapping up our movie series with the 1998 film, The Truman Show. The Jim Carrey movie centers around an insurance salesman who's oblivious to the fact his entire life is a TV show, and his family members are mere actors. He lives a life concocted like a script that is full of fake people. And he starts noticing things and uncovering the truth, and then things in the story are shifted and adjusted to keep the story going, all in the name of ratings. There's a lot to uncover related to this movie, including a few topics like living a true life, allowing others to script your narrative, and more. We will do that next time. But for now, as always, thank you for your support by listening to this episode. I really do appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you back here next time when we'll have more for you on Cue.